Welcome to the American Valor podcast. Today we are speaking with Andy Neary. Andy is the owner of Complete Game Consulting, a keynote speaker, motivational speaker, and former MLB player. He works with insurance professionals looking to create a stronger online presence to build more credibility with their target prospects. Andy, welcome to the show. How are you, brother?
Good, Enrique. I'm honored to be on here, man. It's rare I get to be on a podcast about baseball, so I know I'm going to geek out here.
All right. Well, we're ecstatic to have you and have you share around the four pillars that we will be discussing. But before we get into that, brother, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, man. Baseball's been in my blood. I grew up in a family. My dad was a longtime high school baseball coach in the town I grew up in. And so when you have that in your house, you get a lot of good mentorship early on. And it's interesting. I actually was a chunky kid. If anybody can see me on camera right now, when you're a chunky kid, you avoid attention when you're young because a lot of it is negative. But what was interesting for me growing up, baseball the pitcher's mound was a place I always felt comfortable, and had the opportunity to play for my dad in high school. Went on to play Division I college baseball for the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, which is 30 miles from where I grew up, and ultimately allowed me to sign a free agent contract, at the major league level with the Milwaukee Brewers. So I wasn't, I would say I wasn't gifted with a thunderbolt for an arm as a lot of pitchers are. You look at the MLB pitchers today, everybody's throwing 96, 97 miles an hour, but um, we'll probably get into this. My story, especially when I made it at that level, was unfortunately a lot of that was built around fear of comparison, judgment, and failure as a free agent. And I think that's what ultimately led me to have probably a much shorter career than I should have.
That's amazing. The great thing about, and you talk about your dad, mentorship,
Mm.
folks, it's so critical to have. If you ever want to attain something in a specific field, this one, baseball, you said, hey, you had it in house. That's always good to have that type of reinforcement. And we'll get into, some of the shortness there. But thank you for sharing that background.
Yeah.
And folks, at the Boutfella Act of Valor Foundation, we strive to educate, support, and recognize by instilling the timeless values of service, sacrifice, legacy, and citizenship. Now, Andy, based on the pillars mentioned, I would like to start today's conversation with sacrifice because you mentioned your childhood. There are some sacrifices made there. You mentioned fear, but during your career, there must have been moments when you personally sacrificed, and that personal
Mm.
sacrifice was necessary
Hmm.
for the success of the team. So, how did you balance those sacrifices with your personal goals, and what lessons can you share about prioritizing your
Yeah, I mean,
individual?
obviously, when you use that word sacrifice, what I went through and many others in athletics is nowhere near what the men and women are going through when they're fighting for our country overseas. But there's one moment that I think of the most when I think of sacrifice. When I was in college, my first 2 years at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee were less than desirable. And it was mainly because I didn't really focus on working on my craft as a pitcher. And I often think about that pivotal moment between my sophomore and junior year at college because I almost quit baseball at that point. I was thinking about transferring, maybe just quitting altogether. I wasn't enjoying the sport anymore. And when I came back my junior year at UWM, there was something happened that really triggered the change in me, Enrique. I was actually named one of the captains. And for me, it represented that though I didn't have a lot of confidence in my own skill at the moment, my teammates had a confidence in my leadership abilities. In those last 2 years, I dedicated a lot of time off the field to getting better as a pitcher. And that sacrifice there was, hey, living the college life. Well, a lot of my friends were going out and partying on a Thursday night and going to the bars, and I was in the gym. And I realized, I don't know if this is the sacrifice you're looking for, but sacrifice if you're gonna play a sport at an elite level, the sacrifice you have to put in in time is and exponentially larger than anything else you're going to do if you're going to get better at that craft. And I think what I realized was in high school sports, a lot of athletes can get by on the skill. They don't have to put a lot of time on it. They're just naturally gifted. When you get to the collegiate level, especially at the Division I level I was playing at, you can't get by on that anymore. What separates those from everybody else is the sacrifice they're willing to make in time and all the other choices you have to get better at the sport.
Absolutely. And you mentioned service like military service. There's a reason why it's only 1% of the population, right? They, to work at that level, it requires a level of sacrifice that others are not willing to pay,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, you're right. What got you there won't get you necessarily to the other level if you're not willing to pay that price. And sacrifice takes a lot of different modes for people in different ways.
Yep.
Yours was a requirement of time so that you can become the best you can. Now, it's interesting how a position of leadership or a vote of confidence in your leadership ability was what kind of got you over the say, maybe I need to make this investment, for the sake of the team.
And I've never really thought about it until you just said that. I think it was the reason that moment was the trigger is I realized that if I'm going to be a leader, I have to lead by example. I think my first 2 years at UWM, I just kind of went with the flow, right? Just followed along, was a good follower, but now I got to be a leader. And if you're going to be a good leader, yeah, you can be the rah leader, or you can just lead by example. And I said, all right, I got to lead by example. And that's going to require me to do more than anybody else, outwork everybody else, and show what I'm doing off the field to make me good on it. And I think that moment right there, Enrique, impacted the rest of my career in baseball, but it also has impacted who I am today running complete game consulting for sure.
Absolutely. Love that. And yeah, leadership also calls for service. Usually that's what you choose to do. You say, okay, no more about me. It's now about these folks that I'm leading. And so,
Mm-hmm.
talking about service, many athletes use their platform to serve their communities in meaningful ways. How did you approach service during and after your career? And what inspired you to give back?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll be honest, I'm still looking for ways to give back because I know I could have done a better job, especially while I was playing. For me, you know, that service was spending the off seasons working with the youth in where I grew up or near the campus of where I went to school because, I think the best thing anybody can do to give back to whatever allowed them to have a career. So if it could be sports, it could be business, you name it, is to mentor younger people, newer people to that endeavor to ensure that endeavor, that industry continues to thrive and people can continue to succeed. So for me back in the day, it was what can I do to support youth baseball around here? Not with my money, but with my time to work with these kids to ensure they are getting the right coaching and the right mentorship to succeed. Now, for me, it wasn't just, hey, man, I'm going to make you a better pitcher. It was, okay, when you're down 4-0 and you've got to keep your team in the game, what's going on here? That mentorship to me isn't just skill and technique, it's also mindset. And I look at what I do today, Enrique, running complete game consulting. Part of our business model is coaching. I happen to coach insurance professionals today, but guess what? 90% of my conversation is about mindset, not skill and technique. And I think as a leader, the best thing you can do, no matter where or who you're leading, is how are you going to develop future leaders who are going to have the mindset to lead and succeed?
Well, I tell you, the wars won in the mind
Mm-hmm.
become effectual in your sight. You see the result of the wars that are won and lost in the mind. And so, great addition to what you are talking about, which is mentorship and the youth. Because if we can get youth to have a resilient and steady mind,
Oh,
something that they can count on, yeah, wow, our future will be bright indeed. And it kind of lends to the subject of legacy, right? Because when we go back, and I've often thought of this, hey, Enrique, when you're going to throw on that Navy uniform, right, with all these medals, and go back to your middle school, right? Go back to your high school and show them what uh, work now
mm.
looks like later, right? And so, speaking about legacy, as a former Major League Baseball player, your achievements are etched in history, right? Because that
Yep.
thing is in there. You were there, you did this, and so on and so forth. So, how do you hope your legacy is remembered both on and off the field?
Yeah, I love that. I want to share one thing about going back to what you just said about resiliency. And I'm probably going to get myself in trouble by sharing this, but I think one of the biggest problem in sports today at the youth level is a lack of resiliency. You know, you look at the recruiting today for high school football, high school basketball, it's insane, right? With the NIL deals now that kids are getting in college and but what you're seeing is you're seeing a lot of these so-called 4 or 5 star athletes get to the collegiate level and completely fall flat on their face. It has nothing to do with skill, technique, talent. It's all resiliency. I talk about it in our world. I'm going to share a little business analogy. When I help a client identify an ideal prospect, I tell them there's two ways to identify an ideal prospect: demographics and psychographics. Demographics are like an athlete's height, weight, and speed. It can look good on paper. Psychographics is how's that athlete going to perform in the fourth quarter with the game on the line? That's what we're missing today. We identify a lot of good young talent athletically based on height, weight, speed. We don't do a good job going, how are they going to perform with the game on the line? And you're seeing a lot of young kids that can't step up to that. And that's comes back to the chatter between the ears, right? Legacy. I had the fortunate opportunity to do something really cool this summer. So I spent we're my fiance and I are both from Wisconsin. We moved out to Colorado 9 years ago. A year ago, moved back to my hometown, which was kind of an adjustment for me. But like this summer, I got the opportunity to speak to the young athletes at the high school I used to go to. And I do a lot of keynoting, Enrique. That was one of the toughest keynotes, little talks I've given. One, because my niece was in the audience. But two, it was because it was such a full circle moment of being able to come back and talk to the person I was 28 years ago. It was a cool moment, but at the same time, when it comes to giving back, that legacy, the legacy I want to leave is the work ethic I put in to achieving the results I did, whether that's sports or business or heck, as a fiance. And I have a lot of areas I can improve. But I think that's really the legacy I want to leave at the end of the day. It's not, hey man, this guy went 20-1 in his high school career. He played Major League Baseball. No. It's wow. I've never seen somebody work as hard as that dude. That's the legacy I want to leave at the end of the day.
And that's the legacy that ends up being fruitful for all those, right? When we talk about resiliency, it's funny because you mentioned that this Sunday, you watch a football game, the kicker gets up there, 3 field goals, didn't make it. And I'm like, well, I could do that. Give me the ball. I could do that. And, it goes back to the mind game, right? How are you prepared for those moments where the game is on the line or an advantage is on the line and you
Mm-hmm.
can't capitalize on that? And so, a very great point there. And I know that those high school students were encouraged and inspired to see you come back. I can't wait to go and speak to those folks from where I came from,
Mm-hmm.
albeit it's in New York, and I'm going to wait till the snow is gone. So, but talk about going back to your schools and going back to your communities, that is right in line with what we call citizenship, right? Being a great citizen. In your view, what role do professional athletes play in shaping positive citizenship, and how have you embraced that responsibility?
Yeah, that's a great, let me start by saying my athletic endeavors are not at the level of some of the people you see on TV today. Let's start there. But I think to your point, as a professional athlete, let's just call it as a recognizable name in a community. I believe you do have an obligation to hold yourself to a high standard because of how easy it is to follow somebody today with things like social media. You have to remember people are always watching, and actions, things you say, things you do are etched in history forever because of things like social media. And so I think as somebody who is a person people look up to, yeah, you should be holding yourself to a very high standard. And you see it when a professional athlete is somebody people kids love, but then you see who they are off the field and you're like, what? Really? To me that doesn't resonate because I'm like, you need to lead your life knowing people are watching, knowing people are trying to model themselves after you. So do everything you can to set a very high standard for how you live your life. Here's a great example in my business. So my baseball career is done. I'm now finding myself in insurance, or I should say, insurance found me, which is the case for most people who get into that industry. But when I started selling health insurance, Enrique, you know what changed for me? I started taking my health very seriously because I'm sitting here going, wait, if I'm going to sell health insurance and I'm going to come to your business and tell you, hey, Mr. Business Owner, your rates are going up because your people are unhealthy, I better look the part. And that's what I talk about, that high standard. It's like, would you go to get training at the gym from somebody who's 20 pounds overweight? Of course not. But people are watching, people are trying to model themselves after you. You should be holding yourself to a higher standard than anybody else will hold for you.
Absolutely. Now, that leadership by example, you mentioned it earlier, right? This is where most people get their view of you. And so, if you're a leader out there, or you're a professional baseball player, or you're just a professional in whatever venture you want to go down, leadership by example is where it's at. That is what models true citizenship, right? Can I be a citizen that can be counted on when my nation says, hey, I need your help in whatever capacity, right? Because it may be military, it may not be. I mentioned it's just 1% that really goes in at any given time. And so that pool is pretty small,
Mm-hmm.
right? But in terms of being a great citizen, it's modeled in your day to day life. And so I totally agree there. Now, Andy, we have known each other for over 4 years, and I had the benefit of having you in my other podcast
Yep.
before. But where can our audience learn more about you, and how can they support you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, first, I'm all over LinkedIn. So if we have any LinkedIn users there, definitely look me up there. Andy Neary, founder, CEO of Complete Game Consulting. I do have a site dedicated for my speaking, andyneary.com. And then we have our business site, completegameconsulting.com. But yeah, I mean, happy to connect with anybody, have a conversation. Like you said, I think to me, the full circle, the summary of this conversation, Enrique, is you want to be a good citizen, you want to have a legacy, you want to lead, be a great leader and have valor, have some self accountability. I think at the end of the day, what we're missing right now in this country is far too much self accountability. And the more
I
people
bel
we can step up and do that, the more we are going to display all these four characteristics we've been talking about.
Absolutely. That is true indeed. Now, folks, this conversation with Andy is such a pleasure because I mentioned we've been knowing each other for 4 years, had him before. But please support his endeavors. If you are looking for a speaker or anything of the likes, he's a great one. And I encourage you to reach out to him. Folks, for more information on the foundation, please visit us at our website, activevaloraward.org. And on behalf of the Bob Feller Act of Valor Foundation, thank you all for joining us on this episode.